Skill checks, failure, and dressing like a disco super cop. Here's how to get the most out of 2019's best RPG. Disco Elysium is a classically designed CRPG in which you control an amnesiac detective recovering from the worst hangover in the history of human existence. But it's also much more than that. It's a thoughtful, unusual adventure through a richly detailed alternate universe, and one that allows you to be whatever kind of cop you desire. From shuffling hobo cop who apologizes all the time to spin-kicking jamrock superstar. And while there's no clicky combat or raw tests of skill, it can be difficult to get to grips with. Not least because you're not just solving a crime, but piecing together the shattered human psyche of a drunk detective who argues with inanimate objects and can't even find both shoes. And that's where this list will help. It's a largely spoiler-free examination of Disco Elysium systems with recommendations about the best way to approach it. And that's enough backstory, let's detect. Here are 6 ways to get the most out of 2019's best RPG.
Right now I know that you're worried. Don't be worried. Everything's going to be alright.
Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, you need to play Disco Elysium differently. The cooler you try to act, the more likely it is you'll die a crushing, embarrassing death. You can even die taking your own tie off a ceiling fan. So with that in mind, try embracing the game's oddities. Be weird, make unusual choices, and, as I'll talk about later on, don't be afraid to fail.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
All of the tests in Disco Elysium are randomized dice rolls based on your character traits. The entire game is built around testing your character's abilities, from mental and physical traits such as volition or physicality to more esoteric ones like Inland Empire, which measures the inventiveness of your imagination and the power of your internal monologues. When you first start out, it's worth scanning these abilities and picking the ones that reflect what kind of detective you want to be. If you're planning on being a merciless brute, put points into physical instrument and half-light. If you want to be a disco version of Poirot, put points into empathy and perception. My detective excelled at Inland Empire, which meant I spent a significant time in-game examining my dreams and talking to my tie. Yes, my literal necktie, it's that kind of game. Just remember that whatever you choose, the experience of playing the game will mold and change your character as you find ways to overcome new problems and discover what kind of person you are. At some point, Disco Elysium will reflect on your progress and suggest who your hero might be, but don't worry too much about making the correct choice. This is one of the most densely written games ever made, and there's no way you'll be able to see everything in a single playthrough. More than this, your lead is one of the most malleable characters in gaming. You can be anything from a self-loathing communist art cop to a self-appointed disco celebrity, so just see where the game takes you.
Hello. Let me know if I can help you with anything.
To get the most out of Disco Elysium, you're going to need to take your time. It's a dense game packed with characterful, smartly written text. You'll find it easier and more rewarding if you slow down and read as much as you can. Like an elderly shopper paying for their groceries with loose change, it's not in a hurry to go anywhere. You'll spend the first 30 minutes of the game getting dressed, for instance. It'll probably take you a few hours to find both of your shoes, and good luck getting your murder victim down from the hanging tree on the first in-game day. So the point here is that you can't and shouldn't rush things. This is partially because the game rewards you for taking your time. You get XP from exploring interesting conversational avenues with NPCs. Ask questions and don't be afraid to act strangely. Sometimes this can take you to some revealing places. In the same breath, however, you should be aware that time in Disco Elysium is relative. It doesn't pass when you're wandering around investigating, but it does when you're having conversations. If you need to pass the time to level up a new thought, for instance, something I'll talk about in just a bit, try having a few conversations to move things along. You can also sit on benches or read a book if you want to quickly wind forward the clock. There are a few caveats to this. Some quests have time limits, so pay attention to the time of day and prioritise them. Don't start chatting to everyone, for example, if you have a dead body that needs refrigerating. Some tasks can only be done on certain days. These will have a clock next to their name on the journal screen, and remember that Disco Elysium is a logical game with linear time. If you want to steal a dead man's boots, for instance, you need to do so before you send him to the morgue. You monster. And finally, remember that some things can only be done when your partner Kim is asleep. Wait until he goes to bed or is off on another assignment, and then get busy collecting illicit drugs, having salacious conversations about your past indiscretions, or just have a bath to wash off all the corpse juice. Much better. One of the brilliant and unusual elements of Disco Elysium is that it's perfectly okay, and sometimes even desirable, to fail. You'll often find yourself in situations where the odds are stacked against you, or you're facing an obstacle you just can't circumvent.
You have really let yourself go.
My advice to you here is to embrace failure and see where it takes you. It's all part of the unique journey the game offers. The results can be amazing. Things like excruciating attempts at seduction, making up a preposterous fake name when you can't remember your own, and the most flamboyant attempt at sneaking away, to use the term very loosely, in all of gaming. You'll miss these bits if everything goes right. To get the most out of the game, however, it's worth being mindful of what type of check it is that you're attempting. There are two types of roll. White checks can be reattempted if you fail. You can try again if you put more points into the relevant skill, and sometimes world events will open these back up. Red checks, however, cannot be retried. Remember that your clothes all have modifiers that affect certain skills, and you can change your outfits to optimize your chances of success. Try to collect as much gear as possible and wear a well-rounded outfit with a blend of useful modifiers, even if it makes you look like you've been kicked through a 70s charity shop. You can back out of most conversations, change your getup, and go back to attempt a skill check. You can also increase your chances of success by using drugs and booze. These boost your stats, but at a cost to your health, which is precisely how you got into this mess in the first place. With all this in mind, I'd encourage you not to save scum. Of course, if you want to play the game as a flawless, spin-kicking super cop who can best any opponent, I'm not going to stop you. But Disco Elysium is at its most rewarding and nourishing when you go down paths no other game can take you. And occasionally, that means getting things wrong. Really, really wrong.
Give me a moment. The cold never does any good for my bronchitis.
There is a lot of information to pass in Disco Elysium. It can sometimes be slightly overwhelming. And just as your partner Kim writes everything down in his little notebook, you too can make use of the game's interface. Your journal keeps track of all your ongoing quests and includes hints about what to do and who to speak to. If you find yourself at a dead end, check here first. Likewise, the map has a tab listing all the white checks that are outstanding and highlights the ones you're in a position to retry. Again, if you get stuck, try solving some of these to progress. These checks should also influence how you choose to level up. The challenges in Disco Elysium aren't constant. You won't be getting into random encounters every 5 minutes. Because of this, it's better to stockpile your skill points and use them to upgrade specific skills when you need to retry a check. You can still focus on the abilities you care most about, but the game is generous enough for you to buff supplementary abilities when you need them. Finally, spend a bit of time in your thought cabinet. This is a secondary way of leveling up that adds personality and direction to your character. Every so often in Disco Elysium, thoughts occur to you that can be internalized, changing how you approach problems. Think of them like physical, semi-permanent buffs that change your stats and define who you are. New thoughts can come from anywhere. If you act in a certain way by being honorable, egotistical, or apologetic, for instance, new thoughts will occur to you, allowing you to refine exactly who you're playing as. Some thoughts will improve your abilities, things like letting you see further in the map, for instance, but they can come with debuffs, and they even change how people treat you. You won't know what each one does until you've internalized it, and this is another reason to stockpile your ability points. You can forget thoughts by spending a skill point, hence the semi-permanent element, and you also need to spend skill points to unlock new slots. There are around 53 thoughts in all, enough for a video all of its own, and you won't come close to finding them all in a single playthrough. Disco Elysium is a detective game in the truest sense of the word. Very little is explicitly spelled out, and it rarely holds your hand. You'll need to get out, explore, and converse with people. You should try talking to everyone, however unimportant, bigoted, or otherwise irritating they seem.
Oh, by the way, I heard you got a rather rude reception from a certain Lawrence Garte. Some people have no manners.
By doing so, objects may be revealed you wouldn't otherwise see, allowing you to progress to areas that were previously closed off. Moreover, it's worth paying attention to what they actually say, as it can reveal important hints. That feels like an obvious thing to say, but it's essential here. At the same time, you don't need to exhaust every line of interrogation. Most games encourage conversational completionism, but it can get you into trouble in Disco Elysium. Ask the questions you think are interesting, but don't feel you need to say something just because it's still highlighted. In fact, doing so might embarrass or annoy NPCs.
Fine, don't you worry about me. Now, what you want from me, policeman?
The mysteries in Disco Elysium extend beyond dialogue. Try clicking everywhere on an area before leaving in case you've missed a location you're able to explore. And make sure you equip the torch when exploring dark areas. This will help you see more orbs and uncover hidden areas. And you can find it in Kim's Kinema, i.e. car, outside the Whirling in Rags Hotel. On a related note, remember that certain things are easier to see in the correct circumstances, such as markings on a wall at twilight or watermarks on documents as viewed through the lights of a vehicle. And my final entry is the most important element of detective work in Disco Elysium.
I mean, I don't personally mind. Folks is just folks, you know, and folks gotta eat. Just some of the other guys don't look too kindly on the scabbing kind, if you know what I mean, mister.
A few of the entries above are quite conceptual, but let's finish with something practical. In Disco Elysium, the tab button is your best friend. Whenever you get stuck, run low on the game's currency, real, or want to uncover secret compartments, hit tab. It highlights hidden items and exits, showing you things you'd likely otherwise miss. And you shouldn't feel ashamed of it. Disco Elysium is a highly stylized game, so there's a trade-off between that striking, artful aesthetic and visual fidelity. And more than that, the tab button is a staple of classic CRPGs such as Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment. If it was good enough for them, it's good enough for Disco Elysium. And you'll need it too, even if it's just to scab through the streets to find coins to pay for your accommodation. Pressing tab even gives you useful info about the nature of the thing you've uncovered. A green highlight means you can interact with it, yellow usually pertains to elements that require further investigation, and a white outline means the object or door is locked. And if you can't find a key, you might be able to get it open using a pry bar. Try searching everywhere. Finding new clothes will increase your versatility, and things like postcards can be sold at the pawn shop to get some extra cash.
It's not often that I see officers of the RCM in my pawn shop.
And if you're especially low on money, you can collect bottles, probably the ones that you dropped, and deposit them at the Fritter convenience store. You'll need a plastic bag to do so though, and if you don't want to know where that is, skip ahead now. Ready? Head west after leaving the Whirling in Rags Hotel, look for the drunk on the steps and examine the bag at his feet. He'll move later on, but the bag will still be there. Equip this and you can now recycle and make money. Lovely. So there you go. Even after all of that, a gigantic list of tips, clumsily disguised as 6, I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface of this overwhelmingly cerebral game. Let me know if you want more specific tips, or maybe just an hour-long video essay about how utterly brilliant it is, and I'll gladly oblige because, you know, I quite like it. And if you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please hit the subscribe button and remember to ring the bell so you know when our next video lands.